Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan, at MSP. This is the Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. Or maybe the extra, I don't know, mug of tea to get your lips around to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. It's 12:30 and I realised I hadn't even had my first cup of tea of the day. Oh! My goodness, my life is strange now. Just a lot of talking to a camera about the Ukraine war, and there are lots of people at the other end, and I really appreciate that. So, thank you. Okay, I'm going to dwell on something I talked about in the news segment, in the news video this morning, that is super important. And indeed, Thomas Steiner says is super important. But before I get to that, which was this this command and control system to do with air defense that he was singing the praises of, I want to go to the original thread, which is a procurement thread of stuff that the US military has ordered. And the reason they've ordered it, one thinks, is because that's what's going to Ukraine or has gone to Ukraine and they are replacing, etc., etc. So Thomas Steiner says 2 more Pentagon budget realignments dropped, and again we can learn much about what Ukraine received, a military procurement thread. So let's begin with my favorite item, and I have no clue what this classified program entails. It's a Defense Military Deception Initiative of $0.9 million. So interesting. Has no idea what that is. He says, your guess is as good as mine. As people are worried about Ukraine's air defense, let's start with the items related to that. So he goes on quickly, like $0.9 million spent on deception stuff. I have no idea what it is. As people are worried about Ukraine's air defense, let's start with items related to that Stinger missiles, $75 million. In total, $184 million worth of Stingers have been ordered to replace the ones delivered to Ukraine. As I don't know the price per Stinger, it's difficult to assess how many were delivered to Ukraine, but it must have been in the thousands, especially as Ukraine also received ANTWQ-1 Avengers. So these are basically Stingers on the back of a vehicle, of basically a Hummer. It's also worth noting that Stingers have been given by a lot of other countries. I think Latvia just said you can have all the rest of our Stingers that we've got, full stop. You can have them all. Anyway, the US Army is spending $74 million. And again, when these figures come out, I don't know how these figures are generated, whether that's actually money they're spending ordering it, whether that's a value, but they actually have different prices. I'm just assuming that what they say is actually what these things cost, and it's not. They don't do some other deals, or again, how much is drawdown, the stuff that they've got hanging around. This is obviously equipment that the Americans are ordering, so I assume that this is straight up the money they are paying. The US Army is spending $74 million to replace the dozen Avengers donated to Ukraine with M-SHORAD strikers. So they're giving the Avengers to Ukraine and replacing them with SHORAD strikers. So this is an interesting idea in terms of money, because I often talk about, you've got to be careful with thinking that they're just taking this money and they're throwing it at Ukraine. So here, it could be that they were going to replace Avengers with SHORAD strikers, which is, I would assume, a better piece of kit at some point, right? So they were going to spend this money anyway on upgrading the Avengers. What they've done is they've given Ukraine these Avengers and paid for the upgrade to strikers. But that money might have already. So if you're one of these people who are like, I hate the fact that they're spending money on Ukraine and not spending money on building a wall in Texas or something, right? Then along the Mexican border or whatever. For those people, well, the first thing I'd say, these are two different things, two different budgets. It's not robbing from Peter to pay Paul necessarily. The US has, for better or worse, a behemoth military budget, right? And this is all part of that. And it's not a case of like, we're not going to build a hospital because we're sending some Avengers to Ukraine. It's very, and at the end of the day, you've just spent 20 years, America, you just spent 20 years in Afghanistan, where you were spending more per day than you're spending in Ukraine. Like, because you had troops there and you had your own forces there, it's really bloody expensive to do that. And whereas this, you're getting other people to fight for you, and you're just supplying them with a bunch of stuff, and a lot of that is drawdown, etc., etc. Anyway, the cost of operating in Ukraine, or the cost of Ukraine doing the war with American support, is much less than the cost of Afghanistan every single day for 20 years. Let's just bear that in mind. So actually, you're effectively it's, this isn't the correct way of looking at it, but America's saving money at the moment. That's wrong, because these are two different conflicts, and actually, but there's a lot to be said about how this is a very, very cost-effective way to deal with Russian attempted hegemony, and the Russia-China axis and all of this. There is no cheaper way than getting someone else to fight the war on your behalf, or it's not to say that America provoked the war or anything, but this is a war that would suit America and the West and allies in terms of the power structures around the world. And so spending this money, many people say that actually it's a really good deal. It's actually a really cheap way of achieving the intended results. Anyway, to go back, so that they are ordering these Striker vehicles to replace the Avengers, Patriot. So then he goes on. Let's have a look here. Patriot batteries are useless without missiles, and the Pentagon ordered PAC-3. So they're the most recent variation of the Patriot, the PAC-3. CRI, $67.5 million. Total of financial year 23 order was 321 million. Has been. The PAC-3 MSE, 340 million. Financial year 2,334 million. Both of these are optimized to intercept ballistic missiles, but their range is much less than the PAC-2 GEM. So they can shoot down ballistic missiles, but the range isn't as far as shooting down, I don't know, things that are much further away, including aircraft and whatnot. The ability to shoot down ballistic missiles are super important. You've got the Kinzhal, you've got the S-300 that are causing or can cause significant damage to Ukraine. And there are thousands of those missiles. The problem is that if you're going to try and match shooting down each of these S-300s with these very expensive Patriot missiles, it will be super expensive. The best thing to do is take out the S-300 launchers, and that's why it's really good news. You see an S-300 get blown up yesterday, Russian S-300. So you shoot the launchers and not the missiles is a better way of doing that. Anyway, so the range of these PAC-3 missiles is much less than the PAC-2 GEM missiles. We don't know what missiles Ukraine received, but Germany and the Netherlands have only PAC-2 and PAC-3, and each missile has a distinct container. So once we see photos of Patriot launchers in Ukraine, we will know what missiles are being used and how far away Russian fighter jets can be shot down. To make the most of Patriot NASAMS, you need a command center. And this is where we get on to the funky stuff. Per the Pentagon Papers, Ukraine received an IAMD IBCS EOC, and that would be amazing. This system only entered in the US Army service a few months ago. If Ukraine truly received an integrated air and missile defense IAMD Battle Command System, IBCS Engagement Operations Center, EOC, then every Russian missile entering the area of operation of the EOC's launchers will be shot down. So before we continue the rest of that thread, let's then jump onto this whole system that is so super important. In fact, someone was telling him, a rocket scientist was saying, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Pentagon gave at least one of these systems. This is huge, said Thomas Tyner on another thread. IBCS connects sensors and effectors never designed to work together into one command and control system. So air defense commanders can see and act on data across the entire battlefield more swiftly and use their shooters more efficiently. This is the most modern air defense command and control system on the planet. And indeed, he shows. So here, joint multi-domain integration. From the sensor to the decider to the shooter. IBCS fuses multiple tracks into one. IBCS decides optimal effector IBCS modernizing air and missile defense. For next generation threats, IBCS mature, proven, ready. There's obviously like an advert video for this. Northrop Grumman. Okay, so that is just a little bit of an infographic of what it does. Let's go to Thomas Tyner and the interview I dipped into for my news video. I'm going to play a bit more of this. I want to actually play the beginning of this, but I don't have time to show it all. I'm just going to play this bit onwards.
Do I understand it properly that what we are talking about is the kind of, I don't know, a dome over the troops that are amassed here to execute the offensive? Is that the way we should understand this thing?
And sorry, just to give you, in case you hadn't watched my news video, what they said earlier, well, what Thomas Tyner said is you've got NASAMS, you've got IRIS-T, you've got SAMP-T, you've got Patriot, you've got Crotal, you've got all these different systems that are actually NATO systems, and they will all talk to each other. And so you just plug and play, and basically you put these little kind of adapters on them if they're a little bit different, and they can talk to each other. So you then get this network of all these different systems around, including that new Skynex system that I showed on the news video, and you can put all these systems together, and they can talk to each other. They're connected to the radar. You get a whole picture of the battlefield, the airspace, and anything that comes into the airspace, you can then say, right, that's going to be taken out by this thing. Right, go for it, and you can. I have a feeling you might even be able to operate it from back in your command center. Now that I don't know if I've got it in this section, but he talks about how Russian ones, it's not so easy, but you might be able to develop things that can integrate it into this system. But the idea is that this is one single interface that provides your air defense across the entire country and the entire place. So it's incredibly potent.
Very difficult question, because I assume from the type of missiles that Ukraine received from Germany and the United States that they will use the Patriot systems more to protect the cities, because they got Germany delivered PAC-3 ballistic missile defense missiles, and the United States gave also PAC-3 ballistic missile defense missiles. They only got 16 long-range missiles to shoot down planes because the Russian Air Force isn't flying into Ukraine. So I think what they're trying to do is to protect 2-3 cities, Kharkiv, maybe Dnipro, Odessa, Kiev definitely, maybe Lviv, with these systems. And the problem is that the Soviet legacy systems, like these books and S-300 and OSA.
Before he gets to talk about those Soviet systems and how easy it is to integrate them, this is really important. So from their defense point of view, they're probably going to look at which cities get hit with S-300s and ballistic missiles most. Well, they're going to want to protect Kyiv. They're going to want to protect Kharkiv, which does get Kharkiv. That does get hit with those systems, and probably Zaporizhia or Mykolaiv was hit last night. Maybe cruisers, maybe S-300s. You could go to Lviv, but I would have personally, I would have thought they would protect. It depends how many Patriots they get. Is it maybe 4 they'll be able to use? You're going to set them around these cities rather than have them as mobile defense units that are much more vulnerable to be hit and have them close to the line, which is a shame because they have got really good range and can take out Russian airframes, right? So you'd love to take out the jets here, but by putting them there, you're not going to be protecting your main cities from ballistic missiles and all these other things. So they only have 16 of these long-range missiles that can take out planes. I wonder whether setting one around Kharkiv would allow you a radius to take out planes that are using FAB 500s and dropping them on the border areas. Whether that would stop those planes from operating around there, that would be interesting. I don't know. It's just there are so many options. But let's go back to Tyner.
And whatever Ukraine has, I doubt that they can manage to plug them into the system. They can definitely, let's say, put American radar somewhere in the south to look at the air picture, and that connects to the engagement operation center somewhere hidden in Ukraine. but they cannot order with a computer just by typing for a book system to shoot and something down. I have to use a phone call because the Soviet systems are different in the communications.
Yeah, they are not in the plug and play that we talked about.
NATO has Link 16 open architecture to connect all of this, and the Soviets obviously didn't have that because, Russia is backwards like a Stone Age kind of rabbit, bear, whatever.
So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to return to him later. We're going to go back to the provision of the procurement of these other pieces of kit. So he continues. Let's stay with missiles. The U.S. Air Force is buying $266 million in classified missiles. In earlier Pentagon papers, the Air Force bought AGM-84 Harpoon, AIM-120B AMRAAM, and AGM-88 HARM missiles. So those are anti-radiation missiles. Those are Harpoons, I presume, would be the anti-ship missiles, and AMRAAMs are anti-air missiles. So replacement under the same budget activity. Ukraine hasn't fired any Harpoons, so this will likely be AIM-120B for NASAMS or AGM-88. But as the US Air Force and US Navy already ordered 226 million in AIM-120D missiles, this item could also be for as of now unknown air launch missile munitions. So just trying to work out what kind of missiles that might entail and having a bit of a guess. And now GMLRS. So these are guided multiple launch rocket systems like HIMARS. This time, the US Army is buying $192 million of GMLRS. So far, Ukraine received around 3,450 GMLRS rockets, maybe even more. At this time, the budget contains the financial year 23 buy of GMLRS. We now know that Lockheed Martin will produce at least 13,500 rockets, an increase of more than 35% compared to 2021. And last missile for today, the TOW 2A or 2B missiles for $108 million. Last year, the Pentagon already ordered TOWs for $146 million, so Ukraine likely received 2,000 plus, which are needed as each of the 109 Bradley N2A2 ODSSA Ukraine received goes into combat with up to 10 TOW missiles and a few thousand rounds of M791 and M792 25mm ammo, of which $217 million are being bought for Ukraine based on older unit costs. That is at least 4 million 25mm rounds to replace the Bradleys given to Ukraine. The US Army is buying Bradley M2A4 for $1.065 billion. And the Army also buys the super ugly AMPV in the photo for $136 million to replace donated M113, which were, M113 were needing to be replaced. So again, that's something that would have happened anyway. M88A2 Hercules for $15 million to replace the M88A1 armored recovery vehicles. Double hull ICV Strikers for $301 million to replace the donated Strikers, plus $10 million to replace Striker mine rollers. And the M109A7 Paladins for $207 million to replace donated M109A2 self-propelled howitzers, which is a disappointment as the A2 entered production in 1978 and is the most ancient Western self-propelled howitzers donated to Ukraine. FHTV trucks for $3.7 million. Meanwhile, the Marine Corps is ordering $117 million of JLTVs as a replacement for donated Humvees. So there are a lot of Humvees in the American services, I can tell you. Thousands and thousands. The bulk of the small caliber ammo comes from the Marines, $38.2 million and $5.3 million from the Army. The Marines also order $63.6 million in anti-tank rockets. Marines and Army are also spending $4.6 million in night vision and weapon sights optics donated to Ukraine. And the Army is ordering $5 million of mortar ammo, which leads us to artillery, $20 million for the M119A3 howitzers, $160 million for counter-battery radars, $1.57 million for M777 spare chrome tubes, a much longer barrel life. So those are the howitzers, towed howitzers that are very effective. bit of a mainstay, and $266 million for 155mm artillery fuses, primers, and charges. $817 million for 155mm artillery rounds, which is wild, as the previous 155 millimeter record was $146 million. The US is clearly stocking up Ukraine for the coming offensive. So this is what this tells you. This gives you a story of all of this equipment going to Ukraine with equipment from elsewhere as well. You would assume that actually Ukraine might be in a good place to execute their counteroffensive. $187 million for M982 Excalibur. So Excalibur are the guided artillery shells that, when you fire, have some kind of limited guidance to get them to the place you want them to. So you only have to fire one of these rather than try and walk in artillery with a spotter, with a drone or something that says, right, okay, change it to this, that, and then you kind of walk the artillery in, and you're using 10 shells to get somewhere near the target. Excalibur, you fire up one. Yeah, it's a lot more expensive, but you use one of them and you get the hit, broadly speaking. Already in January 2023, $202 million of Excalibur were ordered to $389 million, or in other words, Ukraine received thousands of Excalibur for the coming offensive. As European nations have also increased their deliveries of modern weapon systems, and as we're finally also seeing a good quantity of weapon and ammo deliveries, we can say that Ukraine will soon be ready to crush the Russian forces. So this makes Thomas Steiner really upbeat. He says victory is near, and gives out his thanks for all that information. So I think that's a really interesting analysis. And yes, it's quite technical, lots of codes and numbers and bits and pieces. But then, but it gives you an indication of the coming counteroffensive and the capabilities and capacity of stuff that Ukraine will be able to bring to bear. And he then goes on, when asked by the interviewer, to talk about the coming counteroffensive and the troop and the force quantity on each side.
You mentioned that all those informations that you provided with the assistance of a friend that you are mentioning in this tweet, that those informations are optimistic and point to the amassment of troops and of weapon systems that are bigger, significantly bigger and stronger than what Russians do have close to the front lines. Do I understand it correctly? Is that the way you assess the situation right now?
Very obviously, because the Russians have all their troops dispersed along a 1,000-kilometer front. There are Russian troops from the mouth of the Dnieper River in the south, near the Black Sea, all the way up through Zaporozhye, Donetsk, Luhansk, Oblast, and there's always a few thousand Russians, never more than a few thousand Russians per kilometer. With a few thousand, I'm very optimistic, because I'm sure there's lots of stretches where there's maybe 100 or 200 Russians for a kilometer, and then we have Bakhmut or Vuhledar, or let's say Avdiivka, where there's a few thousand Russians per kilometer. But the Russians that's what they have, and they have a few, maybe 10,000, 20,000 men in reserve in the rear. And the Ukrainians are putting together 100,000 man offensive army. We know they put together 12 offensive brigades. From the Pentagon leaks, we know they are putting together 12. Lots of Polish.
What does it mean? Can you try to, again, you are a military professional. Most of our viewers are not. What does it mean? Because the brigade is something that is there's an abstraction for people who don't know. What is the amount of people? What is the amount of equipment? What is the number of tanks? What is the number of infantry?
Really useful question, this, because he talks about how actually there's a difference in Ukrainian brigades and other forces.
Vehicles in 12 brigades. What does it mean?
Okay, a brigade is a maneuver unit capable of executing a mission, a mobile mission. So you have reconnaissance, you have tanks, you have artillery, you have infantry fighting vehicles. With infantry, you have sappers and engineers, you have air defense, you have some logistics, you have signals, you have military intelligence. So you can use that unit and give it a mission, not like a small mission, take this hill. You can tell this unit, move out you have another brigade to your left and a brigade that is on your right, and you will strike through the Russian lines here and advance to Melitopol, and then you turn left. These are combat maneuver elements, and Ukrainians are smaller than NATO brigades. Ukrainians are like 3,000, 3,500 people, and NATO are around 5,000, because NATO brigades have a lot of logistics. Because if you're in the United States and you deploy a brigade, you don't need to fight in the United States. You fight in Iraq or in Afghanistan. A long way from home, that means you need a lot of logistics for supplying the troops and repairing the material and maintaining the vehicles, and you need to bring tons and tons of fuel and ammunition.
It's really important, actually. So, if you think about America taking, or any nation taking their army and fighting in, I don't know, just another country, right? You have to be considering food, fuel, like everything, and you need all the people that are involved in that and all the systems involved in that. Whereas Ukraine are fighting within their own country, so a lot of the logistics, you are using things that are already in place, like a rail network that's already in place, like trucks moving. You're getting people making food. There's a charity that makes food for people on the front line and delivers it out consistently, that volunteers work for. Ukraine the latest often talk about this on a podcast and interview a British guy that's working for them, and so there are an awful lot of things that take place that don't have to be done by military personnel necessarily. So their unit, he's saying their brigades are smaller as a result, because they don't have as a bigger logistics tail as an army fighting in a foreign nation or a foreign land.
Polish brigades are much smaller on logistics, because Poland knows if we have to fight, it's between Warsaw and the Belarusian border. And that means the Poles don't need to bring 60 trucks with fuel like the Americans. They just need to bring 10 or 15. So there is a difference, but a brigade is 3,000 combat troops plus 1,000 to 2,000 people support in logistics, medicine, signals, maintenance, and so on. And Ukraine is putting together, we know, 12 offensive brigades for the offensive. So we have 36,000 at least to maybe 45,000 in these brigades. Then Ukraine is putting together 8 offensive guard brigades, which are National Guard brigades that are lighter armed. The combat brigades that Ukraine is putting together, the 12, are meant to break through the Russian lines and then advance in the Russian rear in all directions to basically cut off the Russian units from their lines of communications, from their supply depots, and from their lines of retreat. That's why these brigades.
So what those brigades, with the numbers that you just mentioned, are facing in terms of number of brigades on the opposite side, on the Russian side, at least what we know about it?
The Russians don't have full brigades anymore. So many Russian soldiers died that basically they call something brigade, which is basically some 100, 500, 600 men. There's Russian brigades that don't exist anymore because everyone is dead and they lost all.
And that's exactly what's happened with the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, with the 40th Naval Infantry Brigade down in Vuhledar. We have this situation where they've been reconstituted so much, where there are all these issues with the brigades that they aren't really effectively operating at the capacity that they once were.
Infantry fighting vehicles. So just to come back, there's 12 combat brigades meant to break through the Russian lines. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles like the Bradley, Leopard, Challenger 2, Polish Twardy tanks. These are the fist. They will smash into the Russians and break through. And you have these 12 brigades with 30 to 40,000 men, and they will come down on 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers of front. That means those few thousand Russians that are there will suddenly find themselves facing 30, 40,000 Ukrainians with the best equipment. So the Russians have a problem that they don't have enough troops to protect all the front. And the next problem that the Russians have, if those 30, 40,000 Ukrainians come and break through, then they will spread out. And the Russians don't have the reserves. So there's like 2 or 3 Ukrainian brigades, that's 10,000 troops, that then after the breakthrough, let's say, drives toward Berdyansk and the Azov Sea. and the Russians have maybe 2,000, 3,000 men to throw against these 10,000 Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians will be a little bit slowed down, but they won't be stopped. And the key of this offensive will be that the Ukrainian combat brigades, the heavy brigades, advance after the breakthrough and don't stop. The more they drive, the more chaos they cause in the Russian rear, the more cities and territories they take, the more panic in the Russians and the more Russian troops will run away. Like in Kharkiv, when the Russians left hundreds of vehicles behind because the soldiers just ran away because the Ukrainians were everywhere on every road. And the Russians were like retreating and the Ukrainians were to the left and to the right, and the Russians panicked and left their equipment behind.
So I'm going to leave it there. Obviously, I really appreciate. Thank you for that, them for providing that content. I mean, it's fascinating, but you can see why Thomas Steiner gets quite positive about the coming counteroffensive. I'm a bit cautious about how much these defenses will and the minefields will be of hindrance to the Ukrainians. But it's also interesting that he thinks that all the brigades are going to be focused pretty much in one place, like 30,000 people in 3 kilometers to smash through, and then once you're through, you are spreading out behind, and that's obviously very interesting. You know, I was talking about, well, if you're moving down, you want to do it slowly, methodically, and you know it might look something like this, so on and so forth. But he's talking about, no, you're going to break through, get as far as you can, and then you're spreading out, and you hopefully by keeping on moving and having that continued momentum, you don't give the Russians a chance to kind of steady themselves, sort themselves out, and they just panic and everyone sort of runs away and leaves all their equipment, and then you're taking all their equipment and you're doing what you did up in Kharkiv, you are doing down here. Now, some people are saying it won't be that lightning offensive like it was up there, and others like Thomas Tyner appearing to suggest that actually that's precisely what it's going to be like. So I don't know, but I just find that fascinating. And in my schizophrenic approach to this war, I get really excited at times and really positive, and then at other times I get really cautious and like, no, it's not going to be easy and it's going to be terrible and blah blah. Well, not terrible, but do you know what I mean? I'm like up and down. I listen to that, I think, yeah, no, I can really see that punch through, and I can see everything collapsing behind, and the Russians' morale and lack of reserves, meaning that the Ukrainians really could, punch through and keep that momentum going and have enough troops and ammunition and supplies to go on and take quite a considerable amount of land. I guess the challenge for the Ukrainians is, and then what? How far can that one big offensive or several big offensives go? How much land can they take before they culminate themselves? And then what happens after culmination? Will they have a continued sustained amount of equipment to continue that effort, or will they stop and then you're waiting for the Russians to gather themselves and commit to their own offensives? Will the Russians have enough to be able to do that themselves? So there's so much to consider there, but fascinating. Thomas Tyner is fascinating. I'd love to. I did tweet him, but I don't think he would have read it. But I was like, I'd love to interview you. Please come on my channel. I'd love to interview Thomas Tyner. So much to talk about. And he was complaining that he didn't have enough time on that program to talk about all the stuff he wanted to talk about breaching defenses. And that's exactly the stuff I'd love to talk about. So if you guys want to do anything over the next week, try and convince Thomas Tyner. It would be a good idea that he comes on this show or something. Right. Now, talking about counteroffensives, and is it time for counteroffensive now? Here we have what it really looks like just now or over the last few days. That is absolutely minging. And oops. Just incredible amount of mud, and you've got to be really careful. I'm going to stop it there because you get dead bodies and things around here, but you've got to be careful with your gun. You're not blocking your gun so that it blocks the barrel and explodes in your face and that kind of stuff. But yeah, what really horrendous conditions there. I just want to go on to talk about a couple of topics that have come up in the comments threads. I think it's really important. One is a bit of a corrective. I said in one of my videos that I was looking at how the support for the war, support for Ukraine, sorry, not support for the war, support for Ukraine was high in certain areas of the German public, politically speaking, and the Green Party had oddly a really high, one might have traditionally thought oddly, a really high support for in fact, that was the image there for the Ukrainians and for supplying weapons to Ukraine. But the Eastern Germany had a very low support. In fact, 41%, I think, said that it should stop, or the Germans should lower the military aid that they were given to Ukraine. And I said that's because Eastern Germany's got a history that is more connected to Soviet Russia or the Soviet Union and thus Russia. And I was making that connection, and actually I was called out by several people on my threads, Germans, and they had a different account as to why Eastern Germany is much more supportive of Russia. Das Malauerle, don't ever pronounce that correctly. I'm sorry, Jonathan, but I have to point out a very big mistake you made then. The lack of support for Ukraine in East Germany is not because of the Soviet past of East Germany. It's simply because a substantial percentage of the East Germans are politically on the far right, not if not to say neo-Nazis. The AfD, so that is the German kind of far right political party that has been in the ascendancy over the last sort of half a decade or so, has had a scaringly high percentage of elections in all former GDR states for over a decade. As shown in the graphic you presented, only 4% of voters of the AfD are in favour of giving stronger support to Ukraine. Nothing to do with their former association with the USSR. This is really interesting, and we are seeing so often support for Russia in this war within Europe comes from those on the far right. So Russia has shaken off its former like shackles of communism and has lurched to the right. If you could say communism was on the far left, it gets difficult because actually I like to see a political quadrant, the political compass that looks at authoritarianism, totalitarianism and individual liberties and economic left and right. And so it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But if you're going to go to the simplistic linear approach of left and right, Russia seems to have gone from the far left to the far right in one fell sort of swoop. It's still authoritarian, just a different type of authoritarianism. And this aligns with why they're getting so much support from within Europe, from those on the far right, and they are supporting the Front National in France. They're supporting the AfD in Germany, arguably, supporting, fomenting discord in the UK with Brexit by supporting those on the right in the UK and in other countries, and Serbia and Hungary, so on and so forth. Daz then goes on to say, I might add one little caveat. There is, of course, a causality why so many East Germans are falling for populist and fascist parties and their Soviet-influenced past. One mustn't forget that East Germans lived under a very harsh socialist dictatorship for 45 years. People were not encouraged to make their own decisions, neither in their private lives or anywhere else. The government made these decisions for them in almost every aspect of their lives. And this goes back to actually seeing this in a more authoritarian, totalitarian versus individual liberties rather than the left-right dynamic. And West Germany was a very competitive society. And from one day to the other, they found themselves in one of the richest and most liberal democracies on the planet. And West Germany was a very competitive society. The East German economy was basically worth nothing overnight. Their production facilities simply weren't competitive overnight. A lot of people lost their jobs and even their purpose. And even though Germany was a welfare state, people simply had never learned the intrinsic initiative that is needed in a free market economy. And since not even West Germany was able to fix all the things that went wrong over 45 years, in a couple of years, frustration grew. Let's not forget that the German reunification cost nearly 2 trillion euros. And what does a disenfranchised electorate tend to do? Bingo. It desperately looks for the party that offers simple solutions while simultaneously blaming others for everything that's wrong. The AfD was that party. Mind you, there never has been a far-right party in the West German parliament, national or state-wise, in its history. So yes, the USSR had a profound impact on the character of the society. So the close relationship to the USSR is indirectly the reason why East Germans are not much in favour of support for Ukraine. compared to West Germans, but not because of long-standing friendship to Russia, but because of the inability to adapt to a liberal free market society as a homo sovieticus, and the frustration and the feeling of disenfranchisement that arose from that basically turned 35% of the East into xenophobic and nationalist doodahs. I'm sure you, as a Brit, can relate to that, considering what happened to your country in the last 15 years. Well, I hope that helped a little more. Absolutely does help, and I love this. You know, I can cast my opinion as someone who's profoundly ignorant of politics in Germany, and get a corrective by a German who says, and this may not be corrected. He may have his own bias and luggage he's bringing to his analysis here, but that seems so eminently plausible to me, and fits in line with, as I say, support for Russia in other areas that appear to be from the far right, but also from those who like totalitarian, authoritarian regimes. They like to have their thinking done for them, like to blame other people for all the woes, so on and so forth. And one other really interesting comment, a very short comment here, and this was when I talked about how Gazprom had their own PMC. So this is the hydrocarbons company or state hydrocarbon producer and distributor Gazprom, having their own military mercenary group that is now operating on the front lines in Ukraine is interesting. And this guy or girl, woman, man, whatever, said, I think Gazprom just made all their properties fair game for destruction by hiring forces directly involved in attacking Ukrainians. Gazprom is probably looking at taking over Ukrainians' oil and natural gas fields. Whoa, this is a massive idea. If Gazprom are actively sending mercenary troops and effectively paying for mercenaries to fight in Ukraine, does this give Ukraine permission to hit Gazprom? Does this suddenly open up a whole can of worms that actually they can say, you are sending troops to kill ours, to invade our country, we can hit Gazprom terminals, we can hit, you've now given us permission to take out energy infrastructure in Russia. This is different from Russians hitting Ukrainian energy infrastructure, because the Ukrainian hydroelectric power plant company wasn't sending troops to invade Russia. So that is a very different set of situations there. I think that there's a lot to be said about this comment, and it really made me think, oh my goodness, there's a lot of places you can take that. Anyway, I'd be interested in what you think. Thank you so much. I've talked for long enough. Please like, subscribe, and share. I appreciate all the support you're giving my channel. I appreciate all the love in the threads, and I appreciate all the people who disagree with me. Just if you are going to disagree with me, just do it in a really just nice way, as if we're down a pub having a chat. Not shouting at me saying you're never going to speak to me again and storm out just because I've had an opinion that you don't agree with. That's not how we change other people's minds. You want to change my mind, bring the receipts, bring the rationale, bring some good reasons, not just shouting in my face. Anyway, thanks so much. Take care. Speak soon.